Goering couldn't believe it. At that moment, Goering looked like a person who, for the first time in his life, had discovered that there was evil in the world.
The loot poured in at an incredible rate. 4 collecting points were established in Germany to house artwork, while the Reichsbank in Frankfurt was appropriated and became second only to Fort Knox for the amount of gold it contained.
By the end of 1945, the American collecting points were absolutely jammed to the rafters with tens of thousands of works of art, and there was now a problem of what to do about it.
Millions of dollars in recovered gold were returned to the devastated countries of Europe as stolen property. Millions more were designated as war reparations to the victors. The 100 officers of the MFA&A began the difficult task of returning artwork to its rightful owners. However, on November 6, 1945, an astonishing order came to Walter Farmer, head of the Wiesbaden collecting point. Germany's finest works of art were to be sent to the United States for safekeeping.
A telegram was hand-delivered to me from the headquarters military government, in effect ordering me by the highest command to ship to America 202 paintings. I really didn't know what to do. I was so frustrated, I actually broke out in tears. After I came to, I realized that something had to be done. Something violent had to be done.
Risking court-martial, 24 of the MFA&A officers signed a written protest, declaring that the act of exporting the paintings would make them as guilty as the Nazi plunderers. This document became known as the Wiesbaden Manifesto.
We had no right to them. They were the property of another country. And in all of our international agreements, you do not touch private property, nor do you touch schools, churches, or cultural property.
Despite the protest, the paintings did go to the United States and eventually toured 13 cities. But the show met great protest in America, too.
3 years later, the pictures went home. And the most important thing is that the politic got the message. No more pictures were ever shipped to the United States. That was the end.
Through it all, the MFA&A continued their work. By 1949, some 3 million paintings and objects of art looted by the Nazis were returned to their homes in 14 nations. By 1951, the work of the MFA&A was complete. Despite the official government policy, inevitably, individual acts of looting by Americans did occur.
There was an awful lot of American looting, of course there was. Silverware, candlesticks, cars. We were conquerors.
One of the most sensational cases of American looting was the theft of the Hesse crown jewels from Kronberg Castle near Frankfurt. The Hesse family, icons of German nobility, were forced to leave their castle when it was taken over by the U.S. Army for use as an officers' club. Before they left, they buried the prized family jewels in the basement. Club commander Captain Kathleen Nash and her fiancé Colonel Jack Durant soon discovered the treasure.
So then they took a couple of pieces and thought, what in the hell, why don't we just keep it all? So they decided to keep all the jewelry, but then they began to go through the castle and pick up anything they wanted after that. They took the jewelry, beautiful jewelry that was made prior to 1840, finest craftsmanship, took pliers and wire cutters, ripped it all apart, took all the jewelry out, and then after that they took that gold with them that was cut up and then sold that gold to various dealers in Switzerland.
The heist was discovered when Princess Sophia went to the army to request the return of some of her jewels for her upcoming wedding. An investigation led to Nash and Durant's arrest, but not before the enterprising couple had already sent $3 million worth of treasure back to the States to be fenced by the Chicago underworld. Nash and Durant were tried and convicted for their crimes, but only half of the stolen property was ever recovered.
Their defense was that we did what everybody else did, that we're just scapegoats, and they may have been scapegoats. We're just scapegoats for other officers, and they took a lot more.
Sporadic acts of looting were deplorable, but in reality, they paled in comparison to the scope of human suffering inflicted by the Nazi regime.
There was a lot more serious things back then than looting. And just like I had a soldier tell me within the last 2 or 3 weeks, he said, "Ken, I'll be glad to give back what I looted from Germany as soon as they send back my dead friends."
As the Russians moved through Germany, they also sent specialized teams to hunt for treasure. These were called trophy brigades.
They were specialists in their various fields that searched through everything, looking for machines, patents, precious objects, cash, foreign currency, and paintings. German curators were told that the objects had to be brought to a safe place to protect them for the German people, because once the English arrived in this sector, they would loot everything for themselves and take it back with them to England.
The Russians took everything they could that was not nailed down completely. In that airplane that flew me to Moscow were rolls of carpet, big rolls of carpet. And I suppose it was out of the big room in the Reichskanzlei.
Unlike the Americans and the British, the trophy brigades were taking valuables home as reparations for the Germans' brutal treatment of the Russians.
On one hand, we felt like we had participated in a feat of saving the cultural heritage of the world, and this filled us with great pride and happiness. But then there was also an opinion that the main part of the things brought from Germany was compensation for the damage that was inflicted on our art property. There has never been a war as cruel and as merciless as this one.
There is also evidence that this systematic collection was ordered by Stalin, so he too could create his own super museum.
They wanted to create a Moscow museum equal to Louvre in Paris or British Museum in London. And they proposed to unite all Moscow art museums and to add to their collections all trophy artworks from Germany and other countries occupied by the Red Army. I think that this plan was even more ambitious than Hitler's plans of Linz Museum.
In 1955, the Russians displayed the captured holdings of Germany's Dresden Museum at the Pushkin Museum in Moscow. Then, with great ceremony, they claimed they were returning to East Germany everything they had taken at the end of World War II.
It was a great return in 1955. Our museum returned 360,000 pieces of art to Germany, and the Hermitage returned 800,000 pieces. In total, more than 1.5 million things were returned.
However, German curator Klaus Goldmann and others believed there was still vast quantities hidden in Russia, including the legendary Schliemann gold. These ancient artifacts consisted of hundreds of objects dating back to the 3rd millennium BC, with a value estimated at $1 billion. These national treasures were hidden in a flak tower, but they were thought to be lost when Berlin fell.
It was well known that the Russians had returned a lot of material, even the 16 Madonna
but it seemed absolutely clear that the highlights were missing in East and West. When I began researching it, many said, "Oh, you must not begin, you are silly, all this is lost during the war, don't look for those old things, war is over."
Goldmann searched everywhere, even investigating the possibility that the Schliemann gold was hidden in Fort Knox. But the breakthrough came in 1991, when two Russian journalists, Gregory Koslov and Konstantin Akinsha, published revealing documents in Art News magazine.